Sam Fowles, barrister and commentator, and also Lettice Bromovsky, political commentator. Good morning to the two of you.
Morning.
Before we go back to domestic politics, let's talk about Alexei Navalny, because this is a shocking story. This is about the murder, allegedly, of Alexei Navalny. Vladimir Putin must be made to pay for the murder of Alexei Navalny, according to world leaders. Now, if you've just woken up, Alexei Navalny, who is a very long-standing, or was a very long-standing opponent of Putin, who appeared healthy just a few days ago, 47-year-old chap, he fell ill on a walk at the Arctic penal colony where he was being held, according to the Kremlin. Apparently, he lost consciousness and he died soon afterwards. Now, the Kremlin has promised to investigate the death thoroughly. That's been condemned by governments across the world. The UK government summoned the Russian embassy to make clear it holds the Russian authorities fully responsible. Also, Joe Biden says that the Russian president was responsible for his death. David Cameron, the foreign secretary, said Putin's Russia fabricated charges against him. They poisoned him. They sent him to an Arctic penal colony, and he has now tragically died. Putin, according to Cameron, should be accountable for what has happened. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, also has condemned what has happened. She said he had been slowly murdered by President Putin and his regime. I don't know about you two, Sam, but these are now high stakes. But Putin testing the West, I believe, the resolve of the West.
Yeah, but that's Putin's game, right? This is what you hear world leaders saying Putin must pay, right? Is he going to? Really? Is that realistic? How is he going to pay? In Congress in America, they're blocking aid to the Ukraine. The EU and NATO is absolutely terrified about what's going to happen after November. And all the West is doing is exactly what the West has done with Putin for the past 10-20 years, which is talk big and allow him to get away with it. He should have been stopped in Syria. He should have been stopped in Crimea.
And those were the points that David Cameron himself made to the Americans, isn't it? Just let us, just in terms of that, and we were talking about this earlier, what are the sanctions to Russia? Because actually we've pretty much pulled every lever we can, and we are doing that thing, aren't we, where we sit back, talk tough, great rhetoric, do nothing.
Yeah, the reality is there isn't that much we can do. We've already thrown the book at him in terms of sanctions since the start of the Ukraine war. More sanctions aren't necessarily going to have much of an impact. But sort of going back to what you said, Sam, this is what he does. This is not uncommon. People get thrown out of windows in Russia when they oppose him. People go missing randomly in Russia when they oppose him. The only thing I think in this scenario we can now hope will happen is that perhaps it might change the mind of the US and maybe some more of this aid to Ukraine.
Well, I just wonder what it also does in terms of the response in Russia itself, because I do think the Russian people are waking up to what's going on. Of course, they are allowing people to show tributes to him, and that is a part.
Allowing, you say. I think that is showing immense bravery amongst these people going out, making these sort of shrines to them. They will no doubt be put on a list. They'll be tracked when they go home. Whoever it is who watches them.
Can I read you someone's message here, which I think is quite interesting? Jackie says, the hypocrisy over the tragic death of Navalny is puzzling. Journalist Gonzalo Lira in Ukraine, arrested and tortured to death, nothing happened. Julian Assange, journalist, never charged with a crime, held in our most top security prison with declining health, nothing. As a lawyer, do you see that as a comparison? A barrister, apologies.
No, not lawyer's
well, he's
fine.
still a lawyer, allegedly.
I'm not across the Ukrainian case. The Assange case, Assange was accused of crimes initially in Sweden, I believe, and refused to go and face up to those, and hid in the embassy for, God, what, about
7 years?
7 years, yeah. And so I think that was substantively different. That wasn't a ad hoc, trumped-up political tribunal like Putin prosecuted Navalny with. That was a proper public prosecutor in Sweden. Now Assange is being held because he is, again, accused of crimes in the US, and they're talking about extraditing him to the US. Should those be crimes? I think that's a whole other debate. I find WikiLeaks a little bit. I kind of come down on either side on that, because I think some of what WikiLeaks has done is quite irresponsible and put people in danger. I think some of what WikiLeaks has done is absolutely brilliant and put out stuff that governments were hiding and we have a right to know about. So I don't think Assange is the same as Navalny.
Let's just go back to Navalny, because amazingly he predicted his own death back in 2022 in a documentary he made. He basically predicted the Moscow regime would kill him because it felt deeply threatened by him. His message to the world at that time in 2022 was, when I am killed, it is very simple, do not give up. Now, when Putin was informed, allegedly, of the death of Navalny, he was shown cheerfully meeting workers at a factory in Russia in the Ural Mountains. I mean, clearly, this is Putin in charge. And I just wonder where we are in terms of that. So there is this solidarity. When you look at the EU, it's agreed 50 billion euros as a financial package to Ukraine. We also know the UK has spent 2.5 billion in support. We've got this bilateral defence deal. We're still waiting for the United States. David Cameron wading in here and telling the United States... And he said, I'm going to drop all diplomatic ties. Basically, you need to get a move on. You need to put the $95 billion into Ukraine. Not gone down very well in the United States in certain quarters.
No, it hasn't gone down very well. And there has been now this ongoing dispute between him and one of the Republican senates about his letter in which
this is Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Exactly, in which he... and I read the letter, actually, and at first I thought perhaps it has gone wrong, because when you bring up Hitler and you bring up World War II, it is a very sensitive topic and people don't like it that much.
So she misinterpreted what he said?
Massively misinterpreted. What he said was nowhere near comparing the US to Hitler in any way whatsoever. And I think in a lot of ways that
actually... It was about the approach to Hitler.
It was about the approach to Hitler, and I think that it shows a lot of what the sort of Trump-era Republican politician is in these scenarios, where they sort of act and speak first before they think, and then they double down on it.
I mean, yes, isn't so in terms of this bill, this has started in the Senate, right, and is now in the House of Representatives. Now, Cameron essentially, and I think he's right to say, and this goes back to your point, doesn't it? We've been complicit. We allowed him to get away with this in 2008 in Georgia, and then again with the Crimean, and everyone sort of didn't do anything, sort of tutted. And he's now saying to the US, you need to get this through and pass this bill. There is also something, I suppose, from the American psyche. They don't like being told what to do by other countries, particularly Britain. And she's right. Marjorie Taylor Greene said to Cameron, surely you've got better things that you should worry about in your own country. It's falling apart, pretty much.
Well, I mean... Look at Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. I think you'd talk about falling apart. But this is you're right. It goes to the heart of what we've been getting wrong in the West and our approach to foreign policy in general, which is that it's been much more about domestic political wins than it has been about long-term foreign policy goals making the world a safer place. In the US, the Republicans are blocking aid to the Ukraine, and just to give you a sense of the stakes here, Ukraine had to withdraw from positions this week because they literally had 2 shells left and didn't have detonators for those shells. So that's how dire the situation for the Ukraine army is. That's how much they need this aid. And Republicans are blocking it because they don't want to put through a bill that gives more money to deal with the border, their southern border, and these two things were linked together in a security bill. They don't want to do that because they want to give Trump that issue in the election. So they're playing domestic politics with global security.
But Sam, I think the people listening to us right now are going to listen to what you've just said, and they're going to say, no, we don't want more global policy. We want our situation at home where we can't afford our mortgages or our table, food on our table. That's what we want sorted out. And I know you're going to say, but if we don't sort the world out, then everything here gets worse. But I think people now are looking internally and they want their problems sorted out here.
But both of those situations can be, it's not exclusive. You can't just do one and then the other. We do have to sort out what's going on in the world. We cannot be naive enough to expect that once, say, Russia gets Ukraine, he will stop there. History tells us that is not the case.
Well, he's already got his eyes on Moldova and other
he's
countries.
Power hungry. And the idea that what is going on in Ukraine does not impact us is just farcical. It is so important.
And at the same time, we now know Ukrainian troops have been withdrawn from Avdiivka, which is a key eastern town which has been besieged by Russian troops for months. So the Ukraine is desperate for this. I wonder how this resolves in the States. And, of course, Trump is a key player. We'll talk to Caroline Faraday at 9 o'clock about the latest in there. And it remains to be seen what happens next. But I quite enjoyed someone telling David Cameron to kiss her bottom. I thought that was great. Let's come back to domestic politics. We're talking a great deal about the by-election results. And obviously we're in Purdah because we have another by-election coming up in Rochdale, so we have to be careful. And Purdah means that we need to give fair due diligence to equal weighting to all the parties that are taking part in that election. It will be a fascinating election. Now, the Rishi Sunak urging the right to come together. Rishi Sunak very much on the ropes here. We've seen those really quite stunning results. The swings in Wellingborough and in Kingswood to Labour, but also the rise of another party. We've mentioned it before. Obviously, I have a vested interest in that. Reform UK getting 13% and 10% respectively. This is a party that was polling at 2% not very long ago.
Yeah, and I think that's the exact sort of right word to use. What Reform UK have done is incredibly respectable in terms of getting such a high percentage of the vote. I also think that Rishi Sunak is 100% on the ropes, and I think that you can see that from these by-elections. They're sort of in this in-between of delusion where they think they're doing fine, stick to the plan, this is just...
The plan is working.
The plan is working. The plan is not working. What even is the plan? This idea...
Who's got the plan?
Exactly.
Where is the plan?
We've lost the plan.
Yes, we've lost the plan.
This idea that he's saying that we're just... This is a midterm by-election, these things happen. We're in the year that the general election is going to happen. This sort of delusional state that they're in, I think, is really concerning at this point.
You know, Sam, you're a libertarian. You believe in free will. You believe in all that stuff. So they're saying a vote for any other party other than the Conservatives is a vote for Labour. I would say that's terribly negative campaigning. And also, as one of our fantastic viewers said, the more you tell us what not to do, the more we're going to do it.
Which is an entirely respectable attitude, and one that I certainly support. I think there's a great deal of irony here in this situation, in that we have an electoral system in the UK that produces parliamentary majorities on minorities of the votes. And the Conservative Party have made hay out of this electoral system and benefited from this for the past 100 years, if not more. And suddenly they're in the position where they're in the same position that Labour and the Lib Dems and other left-wing parties have been in for all of those years. And so suddenly Rishi Sunak is having to talk about tactical voting, where... And actually, in I think the 2015 election, the Conservatives ran a huge scare campaign, billboards scaring people about tactical voting.
Yeah, 70s.
They did, yeah.
In 2015, the big posters with Ed Miliband in Alex Salmond's pocket because they were worried about scaring people about a coalition. So they've run all these scare tactics about tactical voting, about coalitions. Now they're begging people to vote tactically. They could even be in a coalition. Well, they've been in their coalition basically with the DUP. They could be in with Reform after the next election. This is hugely ironic, but it shows we need a new electoral system.
It also shows one other thing to me, which is karma. You know, they're going back when the Reform Party, or Brexit Party as it was in those days, stood down to ensure that Brexit was passed to give the Conservatives an 80-seat majority on the understanding that certain things were followed through, which weren't, and the Conservative Party reneged. And they're now coming begging back to the really newly reformed Brexit Party, saying we need to have a coalition with you, which is what Sam is saying. And quite rightly, Richard Tice is furious about this. He's incandescent. I spoke to him the other day about it. And Richard Tice has rejected any talk of a deal and said Conservative MPs deserve to lose their jobs because, and I quote, of their woeful performance.
Yeah, he's come out and he's been quite brutal in his reprimanding for even suggesting such a thing. And I think it is fair in some ways. You know, you can't turn around and come begging back to that party once you're on the back foot again. And they are just losing more votes. I do think, though, when we look at these by-elections, there is something to say about Conservative voters not turning up to vote in them. And that turnout has been low, and that if you look and compare the 2019 in Wellingborough voter turnout and the one that we've just had at the moment, the votes for Labour have not actually changed that much. It's mainly the votes for Conservatives which have dropped so significantly.
So it's not a positive vote for Labour, is what you're saying?
It's not a positive vote for Labour, and I think that's what we're seeing quite often I'm not sure how much people really believe in Labour and in Keir Starmer, and I think that if they do get into power, they're going to have some issues if people don't believe in their vision and if people aren't there necessarily backing them.
So we've got someone here, Dean Bryce says, put Farage in charge of the Tories, they win big, it's simple.
And there's
It's not that simple.
And also on the back of that, there's an article in one of the papers, The Times, this morning, saying the dream ticket is Farage and Johnson leading the Conservative Party. Is it?
I mean,
No.
yeah, dream ticket if you want to, run a culture war, but not the dream ticket.
Or
if
maybe you win.
Well, certainly not the dream ticket for the country. I mean, these are so.
Well, Boris is a libertarian. You must enjoy Boris's.
Boris is not a libertarian at all. Boris cut down on free speech and the right to express yourself more than any Prime Minister since the current Prime Minister. And Boris is the furthest possible thing from a libertarian. He just talks a good game. But I think the other thing that we're seeing here is that they're coming into harsh contact with reality. And the Conservatives' game has always been to say, oh, we're so competent, we're so good at the economy. And I remember thinking in 2011 when I was a student, they're saying, yes, we're going to fix the economy. And then they put the economy back into recession within a year of being in office. Theresa May let the economy stagnate. Liz Truss came in, crashed the economy. Rishi Sunak came in, put the economy into recession this week. And I think people eventually just telling people you're really good at something doesn't work. If you're really bad at it, and people are seeing that now.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. We're sticking to the plan. What plan?
Yeah.
It's our plan. It's working. No, it's not. Look, here's the figures. What's the point of the Lib Dems? They lost both deposits.
Both deposits. On this.
So just so people understand that if you don't get a certain percentage of votes, you lose your deposit. Amazingly, let me just get the numbers. In where was this? In Kingswood, they got 861 votes. That's all they got. In Wellingborough, they only got 1,422.
Yeah, and so on this, I think before everyone starts jumping on them that they're no longer a big power, they'll never return to the power that they were in the 20th century. I don't think that's...
Why not?
Well, they haven't expressed themselves in a way, they don't have the support of that at the moment. But within this, it's very expensive to run a by-election campaign. If you really go for it, it can be around £100,000. They are a smaller party, a general election is coming up, and Kingswood is not even going to be a seat at the next general election. So they clearly threw the towel in. They didn't even turn up for it.
Yeah, now, so that's really interesting. So I had a long conversation with Richard Tice about this, about whether reform should stand in Kingswood, because there is an argument to say it was a waste of public money or a waste of money generally if the seat is going to disappear. But for me, it was the optics. You stand everywhere. If you're doing this properly, you do it.
And I think that was the right call for reform, in my completely inexpert political strategist knowledge. But for the Lib Dems, they're in a different position. They are, the Liberal Party is arguably the oldest political party in the UK. The Lib Dems are their successors. There's no point running in something that you're not going to win. And actually, I think the Lib Dems are being quite smart in that I think the Lib Dems are closer to Labour than either people in the Lib Dems or Labour would say. I think there's no point Lib Dems winning if they're running if they're going to split the Labour vote, the left-wing vote. I don't think there's any point in Labour running in constituencies that Lib Dems can win.
So you are going to go for tactical voting in the election then would be the right way ahead?
I completely support tactical voting because it's the only way that people can express their preferences in our really broken election system. What I would love to see is that we have a system where people can say exactly what they want in their vote, and that is meaningful.
So PR?
Yeah, it's got to be a form of PR.
OK, right? And on that note, I have to go to a break. Thank you very much for the moment to all of you. We'll continue the conversation after this break. This is TalkTV.
Hey, very good morning to you.
Thanks for joining us.
You're with Talk TV, on TV, on radio, online.
And we're on your smart speaker. The British Fish.
Back to our head-to-head. Joining us this morning, Sam Fowles, who's a barrister and commentator, and Lettice Bromovsky, who is a political commentator. This is a great article. Cambridge University is discriminating against privately educated white boys, according to the Vice-Chancellor of a university starting a new course on woke. This is the University of Buckingham. It's unveiling its Centre for Heterodox Social Science. 100 people have signed up for this online course, looking into the origins of the woke movement. It plans to offer a master's degree and a PhD in the subject. The Vice-Chancellor, Professor James Tooley, has been inspired by Margaret Thatcher, who felt that she would have supported his battle for free and diverse speech. He goes on to talk about oppression coming from the top, the demands of government mingling with peer pressure, talking about groupthink, regulators setting diversity and inclusion targets, meaning that censorship was infiltrating admissions and even research. He goes on further to say Cambridge, particularly Cambridge, is reducing the numbers of what you might call wealthier white males. They're increasing the number of ethnic minority males and females in general, and therefore reducing the number of white males. And therefore, what you see is admissions policies being undermined by a government regulator. Lettice, I think he's hit on something here. I do see discrimination, particularly not necessarily about rich white boys, but actually against white boys.
There is definitely this, and I don't think it's a new thing. It's not something we're just hearing about now, that both Cambridge University and Oxford University have been trying to get away from this idea that they only cater to boys who went to Eton or other people who went to these very rich white public schools. I think actually that course that he's talking about sounds quite interesting. Honestly, the idea
it's online, you can sign up.
Yeah, maybe I will. The idea of the roots of where woke has really come from, this idea of where it started and how it's become so deeply ingrained in us over such a short amount of time, because there is the fear amongst society of people worry about what they'll say, how that will be taken. Can you say this word? Can you say that word? And when it comes to tokenism in terms of getting in, I know personally that I would never want to get a job just for the basis that I'm a woman over a man or someone else more qualified. And I like to think that most other people would want to get a job based on their merits as well.
I'm bracing myself for what Sam is going to say. Sam?
Me too.
Yeah, I've never wanted to swear live on air before. This is the closest I've come. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
He's absolutely right. It's wokest, it's absolutely ableist, the whole thing has been skewed.
Total rubbish. The Cambridge still has something like 28% private school intake. Private schools represent about 6% of country. Rich white people are still massively overrepresented at Cambridge. They're still massively overrepresented at Oxford.
Over the last 10 years or so, the number of state school people who've been getting accepted into Cambridge and Oxford has gone up 10% at both of them.
Yeah.
Over 10, that's a huge number to go up.
And so it should, because this is what really gets me, in that this is just a justification for discriminating against people by pretending they're the victims.
But they are being discriminated against.
No, they're not, because allowing the right that a percentage of working class state school people that is equivalent to the percentage of working class state school people in the country, or roughly thereabouts, to have a chance at getting into Oxford and Cambridge, means that people who are overlooked because they don't have the right accents, they don't have the right
No.
They don't.
Well, isn't it?
Will get in.
All I'm saying, I don't think it is a level playing field, is it, when it comes to academic grades?
It's definitely not a level playing field. And so here you go. Let me tell you about trying to get into Oxford from a state school, which was something I went through. And I would point out that Oxford subsequently offered me an associateship after I found success at the bar. But the preparation I had from my state school, they worked really hard, they tried really hard, but they had the wrong books. I had the wrong topics to talk about. I wasn't prepared to socialise in the same situations, because I hadn't had the advantages that you get from going to a private school.
And I can tell you they have. Living in North London, where there are plenty of private schools, parents are now taking their kids out of private schools at 16 and putting them into state schools to do their A-levels, because they have a better chance of getting into the Russell Group universities. Things have changed since you and I went to Oxbridge classes. You know, that it's a very different situation now. And we actually have a situation where white working class boys are discriminated against just about everywhere now. They're doing worse than any other group of children. And then we know in the workplace, white men are being discriminated against because of lists and tick boxes. We must never forget that 82% of this country are white. I'm really sorry to say it, but that's a fact.
But having a representative number of people, of global majority people, of women, isn't discriminating against white men. It's just not
tokenistic, isn't it?
It's just not giving white men the advantage that we've had for
Do you not think
millennia.
it's working another way? So there is a very good school near me. It's actually the best girls' state school in the country, called Henrietta Barnett. I drive past it, I look at all the girls outside, and I think, my goodness, there's not one white girl in that school. So I did a Freedom of Information Act on it to see where they're taking their girls from. It's a selective school, but it is a state school. 62% of the girls come from South Asia. Now, that's surely discriminated against my white daughter, who has very little chance of getting in there.
Or it's just that it's in North London, which is
They don't live in
that's
North
the breakdown
London.
of the population.
No, they don't. Only 2% of their girls come from the local area. They're being bussed in every day.
Or perhaps because they are practicing fair recruitment practices and not prejudicing.
Why do you think it's fair?
Well, perhaps that 62% of the kids that go there are South Asian kids, just because they are the 62% of the best kids who went for that exam.
Might be,
But is that fair to
we
the
don't
local
know
area?
if it is fair. Just dialing down, because I can see Sam's about to have some sort of cardiovascular event.
2 doctors in the room.
Well, that's right. Yeah, exactly. We'll charge you twice. Is there something in this?
I think that I do think there's something in this. I think that as it's human nature, you can't necessarily be biased or unbiased in any way,
Agreed.
in any sphere ever. And I think that the only solution really going forward is to do sort of blind applications, take school names off, take names off so people can't judge it. I had a friend who changed his name on job applications so it would sound more English, because the way that his was spelt was more foreign.
Yeah.
And he did not want to be judged in any way from potentially not being from this country.
I don't think that works, because if you when you do blind applications, for things like Oxbridge, it means that those who have had the right social education, i.e. people from private schools, are still advantaged.
I think that's a massive generalisation. I think state schools can, and so many state schools offer a great broad education.
But and there's lots and lots of research that backs this up. The way that you're taught to present yourself, to connect, to hold yourself, to expect to win, coming from a private school, is different.
You see, I disagree. I went to a private school. I was never taught any of that, but then I am much older.
Can we talk about the other bit of rubbish from Buckingham University?
You've got 30 seconds.
Okay. The idea that free speech is that Margaret Thatcher was supportive of free speech when she used the power of the state to crush other people is completely wrong. And the
Margaret
idea
Thatcher turned the country round. It was a basket case before Thatcher came to power.
But she used the security state to crush her political opponents. And the idea that Eric Kaufman, who has called out for the shaming of people who publicly disagree with him, according to Jonathan Portes, can lead a free speech course at a university is also total rubbish.
Lettice, final word to you. Would Margaret Thatcher be turning in her grave at what's going on in this country?
Probably, definitely, yes.
Probably, definitely, yes. Thank you very much to both of you. Thank you to Sam Fowles and Lettice Bromovsky.